So I thought perhaps one speaks a little bit out of nuclear medicine, but using nuclear medicine as an example to actually explain what we mean by the research and innovation, and not the conventional way of doing the innovation. And in this particular instance, it would be interesting that we then speak on a broader topic that would lead then nicely with what Nexa has been saying about Pradesh. So I am saying we should redefine innovation in cancer research, which means we should understand the broader context, the problems that are there, the problems that we face, and then in that way, even what we think is a further can therefore be a balance to what we see here, because otherwise, if we think the same way as it has been said in the first talk, then we will never resolve the issues. So we do have problems of cancer care in the country, as we know, and this is a very time years that we actually present on this topic. As you can see, clearly there is no availability of radiation therapies, there's long queues, and then with it, of course, people are demising when they are not supposed to. So I thought this will actually be a good moment to say that even that with that happening, we shouldn't allow ourselves to get research to be backward. How are we going to provide good care? There shouldn't be either or, it should be both. And research is really a key driver to better care. It's not a luxury. And I appreciate that the NSTF really, it's really giving us this opportunity to say that if we are going to select interventions, the interventions can still be the same way and can be lateral, but we have to realize that that can only be informed by evidence, and that can only be informed by research. And as you can see, there will be various ways of looking at evidence. It can be by randomized control studies, and then real world experiences when we have meta-analysis, and it is small studies that each one of you perhaps can do in their corner that can end up being included as a meta-analysis, and of course observational cohorts that will inform us about the survival, what is toxic, what is economically feasible. And in that way, clearly, we can understand the diseases very well. We cannot speak about personalized medicine, which would really abuse the word, if we don't have, of course, the information of what is happening in the whole cohort of the services. And therefore, for us to understand the hallmark of research system, we must again, and I'll come back to the challenges and what we have to do as individuals, all of us. We must understand that all of us seated here, that it is time when we speak about science, we speak about science holistically. We have to speak about cancer in its complexity, but every single one of us here can actually act in a macro environment to address the challenges. I mean, we know that cancer is basically a lesion that is really chronically not healing, and therefore it's going to really end up taking the person. So that will be informed by the environment, that will be informed by the food we are taking, and the stresses that we give to each other, and on, of course, various other infections that we can look at. So indeed, there isn't any way that this environment is not going to play a role. And then, of course, with the cancer hallmark that is put up to us here, we can therefore start to understand the smaller details of the cells, the stroma, the epithelial, but first, the macroenvironment and the environment in itself. It's going to help us to understand the microenvironment. And in that way, not only in nuclear medicine, we can understand what the type of therapies will be given, be it radionuclide, be it chemotherapies, be it combinations, which combination is the way to go, and it's not a singularized one. I'm showing this because of the nuclear medicine bias, but this will be applicable to various modalities of cancers. But of course, I will also come back to imaging, which is much more critical for us to do all that which we are saying. So I like really emphasizing this point that as we do engage in cancer, contextual relevant clinical trials are really relevant in that you see what you want to see out of an image. And therefore, it's really embarrassing that 3/4 of the deaths will be coming to countries such as ours, and yet we are only conducting 8% of the global trials. So the innovation in itself means that we have to do trials that will help our people. And then the innovation in itself, again, as I've said, it will be because you're hitting a jackpot. The innovation is to start with what we are doing now as we are seated. We have to stand up. We can't be sitting only from time to time so that we don't end up being obese and therefore feeding into the lifestyle and the environment. So even if we do have genes, that can be a problem, but the jackpot will never be hit if all of it do not combine in that particular instance. So you can have bad genes, but if this is not realized, you will remain a low risk in whatever it is. Of course, there will be some exceptions when the genes only can actually also make you get the cancer. But so the environment, of course, can be various factors. The toxins, the tobaccos that we really go and we have to inform the likes of Elsie here to say that what can we do about the stewardship? What can we do about speaking about beta cancers? Then that brings us to the fact that it cannot be, the innovation has to be that we have to step out of being monodisciplinary, but it has to be transdisciplinary because each one of us has got various ways of solving the problems as we speak, but the problems will only be solved if they are either interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. That is all of us coming with one solution for cancer. So the engineers, social sciences, the mathematicians with models have to come, and then that way we can really resolve cancer. But of course, we can also try and integrate it. But not only is it multidisciplinary, multidisciplinary will be within various departments in the hospital, but in a holistic manner, this will not solve the problem unless we come as a transdisciplinary. And that way, then we can empower then various disciplines to look at the microenvironment that will ultimately bring to the knowledge. But that will not happen because, as we say, what are the challenges of the title? The challenges of cancer care in our country. Clearly, you cannot do research without having the health service research. And this type of research is underestimated and is not spoken to widely. So except the biological research, health service research in itself, it's something that is important because otherwise will not definitely come with the solutions that are there, and then otherwise will not come with a transdisciplinary approach. So what one is encouraging here is public health strength, and then social sciences have to come up, and really, and then of course the economists have to come up and really then come up with a solution that will actually be telling us about the organization, how they have to be informed, and in that way we can avoid the side effects. And as you can see, this image is showing you the good and the bad being the orange and the green being the good side. This will not be realized without necessarily understanding healthcare system. So what is it that we have at the moment in our country, unfortunately? We do have this problem of limited service delivery, as one has said, the workforce that is really pathetic, and then I'll try to speak to the models of that type of research that we can do and innovation in type of in the sense of what we can do with health workforce. And then of course our registry is really we don't necessarily tell cancer what type of information is there. Whenever I see a cancer patient, we sometimes forget to register the patient or a general practitioner elsewhere. That is really compromising all of us at the end because we cannot plan appropriately. And then, of course, the vaccinations, it's really not taking place because we don't have innovation communication in that way. I mean, people are supposed to be vaccinated to prevent some of the things. People are supposed to have pap smears. People are supposed to have mammography, but that essential product is not happening. And clearly the pockets are limited. But do we sit, or is government reaching out to organization and a meeting such as this one? And that is not necessarily happening. So NuMeRI and the colleagues here were trying to say, we have this, and we have the National Cancer Strategic Framework, but this and subject to the correction, to my mind, has not necessarily been implemented. So implementation research is also another point that I'll try and speak to, because we have read all of this. We have read the barriers that we know from the National Cancer Strategic thing to say that clearly poor health is there, but how do we empower that? appropriate and late screening, which is a problem, and then of course the clinical delays. How do we provide to make sure that the general practitioner, the first contact point, are actually helping this regard? We never actually speak to this thoroughly, and then of course as the strengthening of the diagnostics, which sometimes in pathology, which may be seen as a luxury, but actually a very essential part of it. And clearly, we don't develop a referral system that is good. The referral system is very critical in this case, and that in itself is the type of research, because whenever we speak research, somebody just speaks the lab or what we call do at NuMeRI, but actually should speak to having an integrated care, which will then lead to improvement and reducing the socioeconomic differences. So I have spoken then about, well, it's good to speak about all of this, that what can we do about all of this? But clearly, we then have to say we have got limited healthcare workforce, but we shouldn't thumbsuck to say how many people we are going to need, be it nurses, be it technologists, radiographers, radiochemists, or radiopharmacists, radiotherapists. So you need to have an informed model, and that model will have to be speaking to what can you also delegate lateral and vertical. We have to realize that, I mean, as a country such as ourselves, we cannot only have a situation wherein we only speak about saying this must be done by a certain sector. So that means it leads us with a form of research of doing this. And then the PERCEPT, which one was fortunate to be part of, really try and underscore this, wherein we really have to speak about the demand, but also speak about the projected baseline of what we're having, and in terms of the people that have been trained and the people that are going out. So you have to have an integrated type of a system to come up with the challenges that we have in cancer care, and therefore those will inform the challenges of research and innovation. So just to actually show you epidemiological effect, that by 2040 or so, what is expected to have in terms of radiation oncologists is going to be minus 4.5. This is a really a worrying situation. So are the surgical disciplines, including anesthesiologists. So in that sector of the medical specialists, and especially us speaking about cancer today, so it tells us as we go on by 2030, it is already there that the gap is widening. So the research that we are doing in all of us should also then speak to what is the epidemiological impact of these targets? How are we going to address this? But obviously, financing will follow evidence, and evidence can only be, as I've said, it's not a luxury to do research. Then you have to really come up with the models that are good. So in doing that, then that brings us to say that then we have to engage in research that is holistic in that way. I am in the space of the nuclear medicine and nuclear targeted therapies, and this was spoken to by Pradesh, but there is nanotheranostics as well, which has to grow, and cancer care has to grow in that space, because it's clearly one of the important aspects. But we have to know who we are. The genetic manifestations thereof are really not to be left behind if we're going to do this type of research. And clearly, these two are lacking for now in terms of clinical implementation, and we are really there. We are there because of what we do, we see first, and then we can obviously treat that. But of course, and I'll come back to it, the core is still the other type of therapies. But we see what we treat, and that really is a good research, but it really can be informed better by even including the cellular theranostics and nanotheranostics as a whole. So, and in that way, then we can be able, if we're not going to be able to predict the responses and predict the results, the resistance, then our cancers are not, our cancer therapy are not going to be good. We cannot, when we send a patient with breast cancer to radiotherapy, to chemotherapy, or to a surgeon, we have to know what will actually be informing that person's outcome to be good or bad. And in that way, we have to have a model. I'm not necessarily going to the detail unless it comes up in a question, but you must have potential predictors in the research strategy and have potential mechanisms of resistance. And clearly, to do that, it's easier to do it via AI nowadays. And AI has to be well embraced and well articulated. So the AI expects us to work closely then with the basic translational research, but they have to work closely with the physicians to say, well, these are the patterns that I see, and these are the patterns that will tell me how much of a dose I can give. These are the patterns that will help me with the drug discovery, because it is good to have a drug discovery. Yes, innovation, remember, it's not only drug discovery, but it's also about how do you actually give the dose that you are having already to be optimized, and then how do you select your patient. So you might have, say, for argument's sake, you are having cabazitaxel, an old chemotherapy drug. That can still be effective if you've got innovation about how you select the patient. But you can see that sometimes cabazitaxel might not work. Then it forces you to go and have a newer drug. And then, of course, you do that by looking at the tumor characterization. And then you can that's much easier to do this because you can simulate and do the learning with the AI. So this is going to be helping us to short circuit what we are doing currently to be a bit faster, but also to make sure that that is going to be a little bit predictive of whether it will succeed, yes or no. This type of research cannot be ignored. And we cannot then say, well, we're having these huge problems in South Africa, and therefore we shouldn't be engaging this, because at least it can help us already with our problem that we have. What one is saying is actually said in a recent publication by Lancet, in a Lancet publication looking at breast cancer, but it's applicable to various cancers, that the models will then, and how we communicate, it will make us to be inclusive. We can identify patient better, personalize, and therefore we cannot do it alone. NSTF platform and this discussion forum gives us the opportunity for some of the people to see what we are doing, what we can speak to. Then we can collaborate and therefore focus more on preventative medicine. And if we have that, then we can communicate better to say what is it that is needed. So this is really inclusive enough, and then it's actually starting to address even in the biggest challenges that we have. But again, to do that, it's knowing, seeing its knowledge. You've got to see things first to know that it can be helpful. Already, as you can see in this picture here, in 1636, can see this is usually seen as just a beautiful three ladies, a beautiful picture. But in it, the artist was trying to actually come with a way of showing cancer. Even then, you can see in the arm that's lymph nodes and the breast cancer there. And that's sometimes what we will be faced as the audience here, challenges. We are trying to communicate a certain information, but that doesn't necessarily reach what is being interpreted as. We have had this problem, I've had this problem in nuclear medicine, wherein we're trying for a long time to show that, look, you can use a certain molecule to look at the resistance of breast cancer. You can look at a certain model to say you can use a certain drug for cancer. You can use a certain, but nobody was actually paying attention. That frustration will be there, and then because of fighting spaces for finances, that usually is a problem. This is what is really shown here. People will look at a certain way and ignore some of the other aspects, but we've got to actually be persistent in what we are doing and embrace opportunities such as what we have here. Then we can then have a better roadmap going forward. And this is again amplified by showing clearly, which one like showing that as we do research, especially in cancer, and as we are having challenges, we must remember that again, knowledge, seeing it's knowing. So we know that we will save around 10 million people if we have comprehensive cancer approach, which includes imaging, such as an example of this image, which show you, if you don't see it, you will not treat this patient. This is the same patient when using an older modality. You don't think they have metastasis, but when you're using a newer PET-CT scanner, as I said, Chair, that I will not be that technical, you can see that you will influence that type of patient to be treated differently. And certainly, countries that are of lower earning capacity, they don't focus on that, they don't invest on that, and investing in this will obviously lead to earlier demises of the patient. So that type, again, of advocacy research, it's important, and therefore bringing us to this picture, which maybe I will not go into details, again, because of the timing, but clearly it must be that all of us here are aspirational, all of us can speak to the research, and of course, we have to really have a patient-centered approach. So innovation, as one has said, it's not only about when we address the challenges, we've got to have innovation that will center about maximizing the benefits of what is already having. This is an example of when the colleagues, for instance, in Europe or USA will use this targeted alpha therapy. They will tend to use it, for instance, in patients that have had X number of therapies, but we have patients that are already extensive, have presented late. So it will make sense, therefore, for us to have patients that we can treat with a chemotherapy naive. So if you innovate, and as we are seated here with the challenges, we have to realize that you can innovate by using what is existing, but using it differently. So it's not only, as I've said, about the newer drug, but repurposing what is already existing, because the population's biology, socioeconomic status will differ, and therefore there might be different responses. And of course, if you persist in that, you will actually end up, as you can see here, that type of work will be changing the practice of what is going, so what goes on. So it is important that we realize that maximizing the benefits of existing interventions is innovation. But having said that, again, we must realize that we shouldn't fool ourselves to say that a lot of patients, again, are growing. This is from the same PERCEPT study that I have spoken about when we have to grow the population. How are you going to handle this? And this is not a child's play. If you can see that clearly, 240 increment of cancer growth. So we really then have to really deal with repurposing what is existing, because how do we then tackle this type of growth? The newer drugs in themselves only will not actually tackle this type of growth only. And the population that we are in, one happens to be in this, we really are in a problem. So that growth is really rapid. Then it brings us to this, colleagues, that again, we have to have implementation innovation, leveraging implementation science to improve cancer care. So we have health problems that we have just outlined, and then I'll re-outline them again. Then we must speak about implementation research, because otherwise what we are doing at NuMeRI, what NEXA is doing, what medical oncologists are doing will not reach out to people if we don't disseminate that research, if we don't have communication research. So the stereotype of looking at bioscience research will not take us further, especially to catch up with this 340 growth. So in that way, again, it shows that we also have that innovation collaborations. So what it means is that we work with local people, international people, using the little that you have, again, just to show that in that way, you can try and show what is actually the overall survival, the improvement that you bring to the table. But it will not be that effective if you don't collaborate effectively. So you have to have innovative collaboration, work with colleagues, because as one center we've been publishing this, but we have led a group to show internationally that this is a viable therapy option. This can help in prostate cancer patients, which is a huge problem in cancer. But that is done effectively because you have a bigger number. Then the study has got much more weight. So innovative collaborations is critical that we actually embrace this. And this was highlighted in the recent meeting as well. So, but then you need institutions that are really like the World Health Organization and IAEA, NSTF, MRC, DSI, DOH to come on board as well. So which means then you must have another platform of innovative advocacy. And that we are fortunate as NuMeRI that we have just now been allocated as the IAEA Collaborating Center, Anchor Center, which means we must train people, which means we must get ideas from everyone and advocate them, and using IAEA World Health Organization to therefore propagate that we stop all these issues of the patient's workload, that the patients and the high workload and the care that is suboptimal. So, and then that shouldn't be for a certain group of people as well. It should be equitable cancer care for everyone. And therefore, that research infrastructure that we have here, nuclear medicine research infrastructure, should then speak to the industry, to the universities, to the patients themselves. And then and therefore, we can come with another way of propagating the messages that will actually speak to what we need. So again, that that is what I want to amplify, that innovation has to not only be at the biosocial level. So we've got to therefore say we in South Africa has got a research ecosystem that needs to be relooked at in that way. That biopharmaceutical research, there's a lot of investment happening, and I am excited about it, but I am saying that should be shared with implementation science, that should be shared with health services research, especially given what you see in the media here and what is happening. It has to be around it, that we have independent strategic analysts that can look at these challenges and therefore help us, that we then can go into what we can do about the micro and macro environment. As I have started, then the scientists, they will then take the cells to the community and community to sell, provided there is implementation science, provided there is health service research that speaks to care. But of course, even if we do that, yes, we dominate the biopharmaceutical research, but that is not to say that we shouldn't, even if we go for biosocial cancer research situation, we also have to really not undermine the fact that we should invest in newer technologies. When we buy equipment for us to do good research, it must be with newer equipment. I mean, for $1 that you invest, you get $206 if you invest properly. This equipment, for instance, having a CT and a linear together, it saves the time, it saves the queues. Instead of people having the planning that goes for hours and then they have to come the following day, in about 20, 30 minutes, the patient can be treated, and accurately so. So when we do purchase equipment, and that there has to be a research that goes into that innovation of saying, what do we do? But we shouldn't shy away from investing in infrastructure, because that, in the end, having a one-stop show in terms of what we have can actually help. This is what government should invest in, and not really a cheaper system. And therefore, knowing that we are having poorer statistics, as I said, then that would also say that this number of cancer deaths, just to end up that the statistics like this will therefore change. And you have seen that it's going to be 300 changes that I have spoken about. So implementing science will therefore help us to remove those contextual barriers, but implementation science will be helping us to also then know what we can do in maximizing our clinical trials, and knowing that tumors are not the same, whether within one lesion or within a different time, and how do you actually change that? And then, of course, then in that way, we can harmonize the combination therapies. What we are doing is that if we do proper research, despite the challenges, we must strive to have in the quadrant that is last year to improve the quality of life without side effects, but to improve the survival as well. So we tend to only have problems here, each one looking at its own corner: chemotherapy, the surgery, the nuclear medicine, and radiotherapy in their corner. Then in that way, we may extend life to some extent, but we don't improve the quality of life, or we don't even do either sometimes. So we can do both if we do have harmonization. This is just with an example of prostate cancer, but it's of course applicable to various cancers, that if we do aim for this last quadrant, which I want to show this model, this is how the innovation and how it should happen with all of us. And in that way, again, it will show that clearly we can be influencing what happens across the world. We can actually get more resources that way. We can leverage to get funding if we demonstrate this type of research. And this is an example that shows that with innovation in advocacy, innovation in repurposing what we have, maximizing the benefit to the patients, we can therefore play part in significant milestones that are there in changing the practice. And this shows that at NuMeRI, I mean, this is written by other colleagues and not by us, showing that clearly we can be part and parcel of, with the little resources that we have, we can do a little bit of an impact. But the future horizon, despite the challenges and troubles that we do have, colleagues are really that we should really work with everyone. We should have combination therapies. But I would like to end this by giving a message and a recommendation that from a friend who has passed, who was an icon of medicine in South Africa, Bongani Mayosi, that he has said that there are 4 challenges from Fenon that we must produce. The research has to be productive, of course. We must invent, we must build, and we must obviously work to have more staff. So, and then do relevant research. As you can see, being invited here from NuMeRI, having won that innovation award, we're excited because we have an infrastructure we're trying to invent and produce, and we're trying to, of course, have capacity development in that way. So the one problem that we obviously are lacking is to say that we shouldn't be involved in intermediary work. Yes, we must do work of the industry or from Europe, yes, collaboratively, but we must push our contextual research forward. So there shouldn't be any fronting, as we can say, but mentorship is important to all of this. And all of us should be open to mentorship in that we must obviously be motivating all of ourselves here. We must encourage each other that it can happen. And I guess one is invited here to say, Prof NuMeRI, it's a beacon of hope to say, yes, it can happen. And this is teaching by example. And clearly with the wise counsel of the likes of us, yeah, we can really go forward. And then we've got to raise the bar of performance. We can't aim for low. Even if we have challenges, we've got to aim for the stars. It is a sin to aim low, and we have to really take it as such. And clearly, things are done collaboratively. And in that way, Chair, I would like to end here. Again, my apologies. Thanks.
Prof Mike Sathekge, thank you very much indeed for your excellent presentation. It's an honor to host you. If I can summarize very briefly, I think the challenges are enormous that the health system presents its own challenges, and you have to work within the health system and try and treat people while doing the research. But if I understood correctly, NuMeRI is unique in that respect, that it is actually treating patients while doing the research. Can you just tell us a little bit about the uniqueness of NuMeRI?
Thanks, CEO. So, I mean, NuMeRI, it's really found, and we are excited that DSI can put this as one of the roadmap research infrastructures. Under one, NuMeRI, it's really having the basic and translational research, which means then we can play around in trying to find out what are the new molecules and biomarkers that we can play with and play and label them in the cell situation. And then NuMeRI, then together with its partners such as Nexa, Itemba Labs, universities across the country, Biko University and University of Pretoria, then we can have the preclinical facility that takes that molecule that was found to be a good biomarker, then label it in vivo and check on the rodents such as mice and rats. And if the labeling is what we thought it is, then it's good. Then we therefore look into whether that actually is not posing side effects and toxicities. Then we'll take it to the medical physics and radiobiology unit. They will then look at, yes, indeed, even if you inject this isotope, it will not be destructive to the whole body as well, because you don't want to kill the body and the tumor. You want to kill the tumor only. So we have medical physics and radiobiology. Then when that is finished, then we can then say to radiopharmacy and production, can you then start to produce this at GMP level and as you know, in a clean and usable quantities, then take it from the radiopharmacy to the clinical unit, to the theranostic units, which will then see both routine patients that are referred because a clinician has got a problem, but also for formulating a clinical trials. So it's an all-in-one, but one has to emphasize with our partners such as Itemba Lab, Nexa, University of Pretoria, Biko, and of course other colleagues across.
Wow. Okay, that is a mouthful. It is an enormous mandate that you've got, leading this complex operation across the country. I just want to go to some questions. We've had some questions in the Q&A. Busiswe Alant says, very, very informative presentation. Thank you. Are there any collaborations between yourselves and traditional or herbal healers in the development of cancer therapeutics? And is there room for such collaborations in your view?
Thank you for this. Of course, We had been trying to look into that. My apologies that I think because of time, I've ended up cutting some of the slides, but there is a slide wherein I was trying to demonstrate that in the combination therapies in itself, you need some of the things that will help with the immune system to boost the immune system. So traditional healers, what we haven't done well as a country is to actually look into the context into what they are doing and understand what is it that they're offering. Because in some of their work, we have noticed that there might be some immune boosters that might be essential for our work to actually co-work together. But we had approached, vice versa, they approached us, we approached them, the unit in UKZN, that we will start to look into what they are doing to extend our survival, but also, whilst we do so, nutrition. So it's very important. When you give external radiation, you might actually have poor effects or even early death if the nutrition part of it is not good. So in that way, traditional healers, I do think they play a role, and we have to realize that over 50% of the people, they will still go there anyway. So when we speak about holistic therapies, whether they will be offering a form of psychotherapy as well, that is on the other side is good, but we have to invite them to come here because they have to know what we're doing, and we must as well take an effort to visit them. And perhaps if we do allow to engage each other without patronizing, I do advise what can be detrimental to the patient on the other side. I mean, colleagues might not be aware that maybe what they think is working, it could be working, but also maybe being toxic to their kidneys. And we have seen examples, for instance, of patients that had been open, that had gone that side to the traditional healers, but when they came back out of just one cycle, and when you compare them to the other patient, their renal status just went down, and therefore that precluded us from then continuing with the therapy, and that type of cross-pollination might help. Yes, we are open-minded to this, and we want to do this even better.
Oh, very interesting. Charlotte Mashaba says Treasury allocated 784 million for radiation oncology services and surgical backlogs in the 2023 Gauteng budget, but was not used or used for the purpose. Do you have an idea why that is, as some of it could have been used to innovate as per your examples?
Thanks. I think, as you would know, in Gauteng there are 4 central hospitals. So Steve Biko, where NuMeRI is housed, for instance, Charlotte Mackay have got external radiation therapies and services. But George Mukhari and Baragwanath are not having those. And as it is that when we do have cancer care, we must actually try and take it to the other places. I think what has happened, and then again, I have to say, CEO, that perhaps some of the facts are really now updated, but what has happened from what I have heard is that they were not ready on those 2 sites to already implement the systems of those external radiation therapies. There were actually systems that were supposed to go to those hospitals, not, for instance, in Steve Biko or Charlotte Mackay. But having seen that those sites were not ready, I think then they could have actually, I mean, it will be bad, but really reinforced Charlotte and Steve Biko to treat more already, or rather invest in other equipment that probably is still lagging, and then reallocate the funds when the other sites are ready. I think that I agree that we should have reallocated the funds to help currently whilst waiting for the 2 sites to be ready.